dedicate them to that.
Okay, we are now back from a quick break. I do want to thank everybody that's here. A number of you have been with us for whatever it's been now, over 3 hours. And now we're getting to why we got here today. So, Blake, I would ask for you to call your board to order, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to call to order the Cabarrus County Board of Education joint meeting with the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners, and we appreciate the opportunity to come and sit and talk with you all. This is in lieu of our normally scheduled chair-vice chair meeting, so we do have open lines of communication between the two boards. It was talked about at a previous chair-vice chair meeting that maybe it was time to have another joint meeting, and then our board at our last meeting asked if we could set that up, and so we have done that in lieu of having the chair and vice chair meeting. So thank you for being here. We are going to have a few discussion items that hopefully we don't think are going to drag out long. This really, we did not, you mentioned we were getting ready to come dump a document on you with a big number on it, and that's not what this meeting is for. We've got a lot of documents with a lot of big numbers on them, but that's not why we're here today. We wanted to tell you a couple things that are happening on our side, and the first of which is a facility needs assessment. That is a tool that's used by property managers in the private sector and property owners such as counties in the public sector. We are going to, our intention is to fund that completely on our side. We're not asking for funding. We just merely wanted to tell you what we're going to do and tell you a little bit about why we think it benefits us and a little bit why we think it benefits you. And that really, it's not much more complicated than that. So with that, Mr. Whitkey, would you like to just explain what a facility needs study is?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Mr. Whitkey, can I stop you for 1 second?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you go, I mean, I know everybody knows who you are, Blake, but can we start maybe with Lynn and let everybody introduce themselves all the way around?
Okay,
just so we know that. Turn your mics on.
I'm Lynn Shue.
I'm Len Whitkey. I'm Facilities Manager for the school system.
And I'm Barry Shoemaker, Vice Chair, Cabarrus County Board.
Blake Kiger, Chairman of the Cabarrus County School Board.
Barry Shepard, Superintendent.
David Harrison, member.
Rob Walter, member.
Jeff Phillips, member.
And Mark Enriquez, the school board attorney.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for not doing that immediately. Lynn, thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair. The facilities assessment is an assessment that sort of establishes a baseline for all of the facilities and all of the equipment and materials and systems that make up our schools. There's a lot of conversation, as you know, about what's needed, why is it needed, and when is it needed. And to date, because this baseline of information doesn't exist, it's historically been a situation of a problem comes up and either we fix it internally or it's brought to the boards for approval and funding. And at times, some of those elements can be large and unexpected and be very difficult to deal with. And the idea behind the facilities assessment study is to establish that baseline. It's normally done by architects and engineers because you need that level of expertise to determine whether a system's functional in the best of all ways or if a system needs replacement or simply improvement. And that's not something that our technicians at their work level are able to do. They're the fellows who make sure that we keep it running and they keep it fine-tuned, but they're not really asked for and probably don't have all the capabilities of saying, well, we think that if we took this piece of equipment out and brought a new one in and designed it this way, it would work better. That's what the engineers do. And the other important part of this is that we need to also establish condition and then life expectancy so that when we start to ask about roofs or water heaters or whatever, that these things will have we will begin to take on a role of looking at things in a preventative maintenance way rather than a reactive maintenance program. The preventative maintenance actually is, that process is much less expensive in the long run. versus reacting to something and fixing it because it's broken and needs to be running. And in some cases, you might be better off in the long run replacing it, but you don't know that because you're in the middle of a need. You're in the middle of reaction. And so the whole concept is to begin to give our board and you folks, the commissioners, a much better heads up on what is going to be needed now and in the future, and be able to plan accordingly in a financially, successful way in addressing the needs of the school system and its facilities. And the reason we if we had people on staff that were engineers and architects that could do this full time, it's possible to do that. But like I say, we don't have that level of person working for us at this point, so we're looking to do it using consultants, and that's not uncommon, to be honest. Happy to take any questions.
Well, let me just fill in. I've been doing a lot of research on our maintenance and maintenance management, and every time that I've called any professional group, different property managers, the first thing that they ask me is, do you have a facilities assessment survey, and do you understand what condition your facilities are in and where they are? And we have over $1 billion worth of building and equipment assets in this county, just in the school system. And so Lynn's group is very small, doesn't have the engineering support that you would need to do this type of survey. So we would have to go outside to do this. And it will help provide us something that we can use in the future to put together a good computerized maintenance management system to fill in and get ourselves driven towards more of a proactive maintenance process than a reactive. Right now, we're probably 85-15 reactive maintenance to 15% proactive, and we need to switch that around completely. That's going to take a number of years, and it won't happen in just a few years, but this is the first step, and this will help us guide ourselves and provide you better information. The sheets that you hear, the $180 million that you've heard, that is as a result of Lynn's personnel going out into the field and just looking at things and doing the best they can to create a number. And some of them are estimates, some of them are better than just estimates. They're more real life because they've done it. But some of them are just downright, just to look at it and don't know. This survey will give us more information and more data to really give us accurate estimates of what things are. And we won't be so far off, because sometimes I heard something in Saturday's meeting about the jail. Somebody threw out a number or something that it was $54 million. Well, that was probably an estimate based on some just kind of swag out there. Next thing you know, when you get the real live estimate, you're 100% off, and that's the kind of thing that Lynn and them are faced with, because they're literally having to look at stuff and just make a discerned recommendation on a price based on very little information and very little time with what they're doing. So I hope that will give you some impetus to, if you want to ask some questions, we'll open it up.
And you guys, if you've got a comment to make or something you want to, just feel free to pipe in. So what it does, just in a broad sense of how does it help us, I think they've it really helps Lynn and his crew try to get a handle on what's in front of them. And the next question was, how does it help you guys? And the basic answer to that is at the last chair-vice chair meeting, and Commissioner Meesmer was there with Chairwoman Poole, and your county manager was there, and so was your deputy county manager with finance, Pam was there. And we talked a little bit about that on your side of the equation. You guys start to see things when they're 5 years out. And I don't think you've been seeing that from us when they're that far out. And that's the one bullet to probably take from this is that should be able to give you that information that your staff was looking for to be able to plan at least a reasonable amount of time out front of a very expensive chiller that's going to go down. Because I guess the term that we want to make sure that we're wrapping our hands around, or two of them. One is estimated useful life, and one is remaining useful life. And you just have to be able to deal with that type of level of sophistication when you're talking about facilities and maintenance of this type of nature. So Really, I'm not sure we wanted to talk much more about it, other than to tell you what our intentions are. We're not asking for funding. It is not inexpensive. I'll just say that, but it's something that we think will help us both to get a handle on what our needs are. So, and we're happy to take questions. I was going to try to zip through the best I can, and it's not that we don't want to have questions. We just really wanted to tell you what we had in mind.
And so I just wanted to, for this particular item, facility needs study, your purpose today is just to let us know that that's what you are taking care of.
Yes, and obviously that dovetails into generating capital lists and over a time period, but that's where it's going. But the purpose of today was just information only.
Okay? Do you want to go ahead and go to the capital projects?
We
We kind of
will.
go through
Let me-
these.
yeah, I did
and,
want to say something.
Commissioners, if you will make notes on questions, I think a lot of these are linked as I look at them, so it might be better if we get, I think I'm going to ask a question that's going to be answered in one of the next ones, so I want to hold off and give them a chance to present and then go from there, so.
I just wanted to comment just for a minute, on this. And whenever we discussed this a couple weeks ago, and I think we were ready to vote for it then, to go ahead and do it, and I had asked that the board withhold that decision to move forward with this until we met with you people, commissioners. And because what we need, obviously, is funding, number one. But even really and truly more than that, we need your buy-in on what we're trying to accomplish here. Because over the years, as, I've been on the board, this is my 12th year now, and we've really and truly had to concentrate on building schools to keep seats, keep the children in schools, find seats for them, that kind of thing, move them around and all. And that has contributed to the reason that we have this humongous deferred maintenance list. That's the reason, because we've been building schools. But, it's not going to do the school board any good to do this assessment without your buy-in, because it's going to take funding. It's going to take funding on a regular basis, and it's going to take, as the chair has already said, it's going to take multiple years to do this. But the real problem is we haven't had a plan about how to address deferred maintenance items on a regular basis. We haven't never had a plan. But I'm hoping that this meeting, we can get at least some type of indication from you all that you are behind us and you want to help us solve this problem, keeping in mind that it's going to require a revenue stream, it's going to require your buy-in. And otherwise, it's just, we're just spinning our wheels and kicking the can down the road further. And that part's got to stop. We've got to stop kicking the can down the road. But then again, I don't want to see us get a list of all of these things after we do the assessment study at our expense. We're going to do it. And after we get that done, then we end up with just a list. And we end up 3, 4, 5 years from now with just a list, because that's not going to solve the problem. And that's really all that I wanted to say about that. But I would just encourage the Board of Commissioners to really give serious thought to where we're at, because we are in a bad predicament. The schools have just continually declined. We've really, in a lot of cases, and Mr. Wickey will vouch for this, we've put Band-Aids on gunshot wounds too long. We can't continue to do that. And so we've got to have some cooperation. We've got to have buy-in from the county commission. And that's all I have to say about it.
Okay. You want to go to capital projects?
Okay, sure. What seemed like a good idea, after sitting here for 3 hours, maybe is not such a good idea, but that was to just have some general discussion about capital projects. We're going through, we have a budget committee, and we've got a formal process to go through. And when we were putting together the agenda to come speak with you all, we thought having some dialogue might be a good idea. Again, after having sat here for 3 hours, that may not be such a hot idea. But one of the things was asking you all sort of with sharing maybe your thoughts on prioritization of capital projects on our side. I mean, what you've been to schools. I know recently Chris has been, and Jason, you said you've been to 20. We've certainly been to a lot, and you know the needs are going to just keep coming. They're out there as he mentioned, $1 billion worth of assets, but you know the how we prioritize and what we structure and do. I guess what we don't really want to have is that we spend time with that, and then we come over and you know. You guys have a totally different view of what we think. Not that your view would be wrong or right, or ours is wrong or right, but different. And then we've got to come to some sort of agreement because at the end of the day, the funding comes from you guys. So we just, you know, again, as mere dialogue was something that we wanted to talk to you about. And then the other piece of that would be, you know, once we set a prioritized list of projects, and we've had this come up, and we don't like it, and you don't like it, when an outside group all of a sudden maybe has half or 3/4 of the funding for a project, and they come to us and we can't do anything with them. Well, they know we get our funds from you guys, but and so they want to come ask for you all for the money. Well, it should come through us. But then it just kind of gets a little butchered. So that was another thing that we wanted to talk about, at least maybe talk about how do we want to handle that situation if it arises. And so, again, that's just two open-ended sort of questions for comments that 20 of 8, maybe we don't want to have a lot of conversation, but we just wanted to welcome the conversation.
Well, I think that we've pretty much shut the door on anybody coming in and asking us directly for anything, so we don't have any funds available. So we can check that one off right now. And I don't want to speak for everybody. I know we have had lengthy discussions, and you have too, about paying for roofs versus larger projects. We don't have any money for roofs right now either, so we're just going to have to work together, I think, as we proceed, and we both get through a budget process and we find out what funds are available. And we will have to prioritize all three areas. I mean, one of the things that Cabarrus County Schools and Kannapolis City Schools benefits from is Rowan Cabarrus Community College's cosmetology program, which needs to be moved and upgraded, and we're going to have to save up some funds for that now. So, you know, there are just a lot of things out there. I think that as we go through this process, and you do too, that we'll do our best to identify some revenue streams, and you'll do your best to tell us what your needs are. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in, but I mean, I don't think, we have said publicly, we do not want groups coming to us and bypassing you. If it's on a school property, it needs to come through you, and you need to be making the request, not another group, correct?
Right, and, you know, I'll just add to that. I know that it was our fault that we started that, and I know that, you know, Chairman Poole and myself, whenever we were in the meeting, you know, with you, Blake, and Dr. Shepard, you know, we had made mention of that. You know, we had allowed that to happen for too long. So, you know, I think with all 5 of us saying that, you know, we didn't want that to continue, the last vote that we had taken on the turf field, you know, I hope that sets a precedent that, you know, those requests won't come directly to us. And, you know, I would like to see them flow through the school board. So, you know, I think we all agree on that. And, you know, going back to what you had first mentioned about the 5-year plan, you know, I think that's an excellent idea. And we talked about that day in the meeting. And Mr. Shue, you know, you're correct. It takes the buy-in from the commissioners as well. And I think that's where it's going to be very helpful. I don't know how long this will take.
We think it's going to take probably 5 or 6 months to put together.
Okay.
And some of the newer schools, which will take less legwork, I think we're going to do something a little bit different there. So, I mean,
Right.
we're trying to structure it, keep the cost down,
Correct.
but to provide the relevant information. But I think 5 or 6 months is what we were anticipating.
Right. And, you know, I really think that is better for the commissioners, better for the school board, the school administration. You know, I think the commissioners in the past kind of felt like, you know, a list was brought and said, here, this is what we need. And then we're sitting there like, you know, oh no, what do? We don't have the funds. And, you know, we didn't know really what was a priority. So I think that, you know, getting that done, I think that it'll be helpful to you guys, helpful for us to know what the priorities are and how to move forward. Now, I know that that's going to be, once that's all complete, that then we're going to have to decide what to do with it. But I think at that point, we'll see how helpful it is to, I think that once it's completed, we'll see how helpful it's going to be. You guys will, and I think that we'll try our best to participate in, moving forward with that. But I really think that's a good idea. So that way we know what to expect 5 years out. You guys know what to expect, and it's just a better all arrangement. So.
I want you to know, when we talk capital, there's more than just capital. And I don't know if you'll attend any of our budget committee meetings. I know Ms. Wilson's going to be there, and Pam will be at a couple of them. One of the things that we're going to hit home is the fact that we have not only a deferred maintenance issue, but we're not getting even enough money to do the maintenance that we need to do. Now, we're not going to solve that problem in the next 4 years. It'll probably take us 10 to 15 years to get through this backlog of deferred maintenance and getting us to the right level of funding to service and maintain our schools in the way we need to maintain them. Now, as we go through that, there's no finger pointing going on, and if you go to any of these meetings, it's just, here's the reality of where we are. And that's one of the things we really want to strive with you, is we're trying to get the reality that we're very, very deep in a hole, and it's going exponential on us. And if we don't start having some solutions out there as to how to get out of this hole, it's going to continue to go exponential, and more schools are going to be suffering as a result, and we're never going to have the capital to fix them all. So we've got to start getting together and figuring out how we're going to deal with this big deficit that we've got. We don't know if it's 180 million. We've kind of guessed at it, and Lynn's got a new one that's coming out, and it starts with 200,000 and above or something.
500,000.
500,000 and above. But there's a lot of smaller projects that are under 500,000 that are millions of dollars worth of those too. So you're not going to get a complete viewpoint of what this is. The document that we'll be going through in our budget sessions is an interim document, and our goal is, out of the survey, that we'll have a more accurate document, but that's going to be 6 months out, where we really get some trained individuals to provide that to us. But that's not the end. This is just the beginning. In May 2012, these two boards met together to talk about an issue, and that was when the first $185 million was revealed, that we had a huge deferred maintenance issue and we had to get through it. Folks, we've got to work for the taxpayers of this county. We're literally letting their facilities fall apart because we haven't, either one way or the other, we just haven't taken care of them with the type of funding we need. Now, we've got to figure out how to do that, and we've got to find out how to get our citizens to understand that this happens. When we build schools, we build 50-year schools. We don't build a 25-year house. We build them 50 years because they're multi-generational, and we want them to last like that. At the same time, you have to put higher class components in a 50-year structure to make sure that it performs that way over that period of time, so that your maintenance needs aren't as great. But when you start allowing a structure to deteriorate, it does it very quickly, and so that's our biggest challenge, and that's what this whole capital needs is. Because in our world, in this government world, capital for you is different than from an industry standpoint. A lot of these projects would be expense projects on the industry level, but because of the way we divide it up, this is capital. And so we have two different types of capital. One is in new schools, and then one is repairing what's there and trying to get ahead of that curve. So that's part of this whole capital needs discussion that's going to be coming up. And so I don't want people to be offended, because we weren't a part of the problem, but we're going to have to be the solution to the problem. And that's where I want us to all get together and draw together and figure out how we're going to get through this big mess.
These new lists, are they going to be ranked in priority order?
Yes.
Okay. I really feel like in the past, and particularly at that last joint board meeting, is that, maybe it wasn't request. The commissioners took it as maybe request, but felt like that those list of needs were brought in and just dropped off and said, here you go. And like I said, here we were saying, well, we don't have near that kind of funds, and we didn't feel like they were, in rank of priority. And so we didn't know really where to go from that point. So I think that'll be helpful to know what the priorities are. And, I know, as you said, we may have two different sets of priorities, but then that's where at least we could, talk about, well, hey, your number 10 is my number 2 or what, and then can be discussed from there. But I think in the past, there's not been a ranking at all.
Well, and not only are they going to be ranked, they're going to be by discipline. So we'll show you in different categories. Kelly, you want to just give us a quick blurb on how we've broken the list out?
There's a list of items that are greater than $500,000 per item, and there's a list of items that are less than $500,000. So we went through, and so we call them disciplines. And it's similar to your format. And so Pam and I and Ann worked together on this to make sure that it was data that you could use once you received it. So we categorized it by year. So if it's something that we felt like it was imperative that we address this year, so we put 14, 15. If it's something that we could do 2 or 3 or 4 years out so that you could plan your 5-year cycle, we would put it in that year. And so we took everything in the 14, 15 year, and it's in a discipline. So it's in construction or roof or HVAC or electrical or environmental, or whatever those categories are. And within those categories, or those disciplines that we call them, we prioritize within those disciplines. So construction's not competing with roofing, and roofing's not competing with electrical, and not competing with environmental. So in the list that we gave you last year and the previous year were all prioritized 1 through 50 or 100, and all of those areas were competing against each other, and it was very difficult to rank that priority. Although we did, we may have ranked 20 million or 10 million or 5 million or whatever that number was that we were targeting at that time, but we weren't able to rank 180 million. We knew that you couldn't manage 180 million, so we didn't spend our staff time, because we know that we don't have the staff to do that, and we knew you couldn't fund it, so we didn't spend the time to do that. So we prioritized the first 10 million or whatever that we gave to you. So we worked differently this year based on the meetings that we had internally, and I think you'll be happy with the data that you get.
One other note, I want to make sure that gets said. We looked at some requests made by some specific schools, and we put in big bold letters out to the side of it, want. It's not a need, that's a want. So, I think we are doing what we think we need to do to balance what the schools, and they're going to advocate for their own school, and what we call a want, they may call a need. But at the end of the day, that's for our board to decide and figure out. But again, so that's what's coming. Mr. Shoemaker and I had a chance yesterday with Kelly and some of her staff and Dr. Shepard to provide some board perspective on it. And then as it moves toward budget committee and it goes through the formal process, and then at the end of all that, we're going to have a sizable dollar amount. So anyway, you guys have any comments? Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say that we're going to start the budget committee meetings tomorrow, but I was on the committee last year. One of the things that we struggled with when it came to capital was how do you weigh projects that you need to do, like you got to replace the roof at Northwest Middle School. It's leaking. It's going to cause damage. There's this project over here that if we spend $1 million on improving the lighting, let's say at all the gyms, we're going to get a payback in 3 years' time that'll pay for that thing. And so that would free up money then to be able to allow us to do more projects in the future. And that was something I don't think we really ever came to a conclusion on. And I would just be interested in the boards of commissioners' view on, how should we rank projects that are not necessary in order to keep the school open, but could allow us to reduce our cost if we did them, versus things that we need to do to prevent damage to the buildings.
I mean, I'll say, I know that's difficult to decide what's best, and that's where, theoretically, you guys know what's best for you. And, I mean, if you've got a leaking roof, I don't want to see a situation like we had at Central Cabarrus where, equipment's ruined. So, you can say that that's a payback by, fixing that roof or replacing that, so that way you're not spending money replacing things that are already there. So, I don't know what the magic answer to that is, but, I would tend to believe, fixing the roofs, we've heard about that time and time again. I would, my suggestion would be to focus on those repairs. But, I'm not sure, when will we, the new lists that have been created, when will we get those?
Through the budget cycle.
Okay, through the
Come
budget.
through the
Okay.
budget cycle. So, I mean, you won't really see it until
Right.
We
Till
go
then.
through our formal cycle, and then it comes to you.
Okay.
And just know, and I know you know this, because you have to deal with it on your own buildings, but, if we fix that one roof, and he's only got so many dollars to go around, well, there's somebody else that thinks at their school that their whatever it is should have been done without that other roof being done. And then
Right.
they may call you, and they may send you a picture of it. Well,
Right.
there might be a good reason we did what we did.
Right.
And, so that's it's just, we know there's limited funds. I guess what we want to make sure that you guys understand is that we are, or Mr. Whitkey and his group are juggling those things, all day long, every day. And we're sensitive to coming over here and asking you every time you see us, well, we need this, and we need this, we need this. But they're very real. There are schools and their students sitting in those classrooms that have very real needs that we've got to address. And so, it just gets tough, as Jeff mentioned, and that's just one example of, well, do you do X versus Y? And at the end of the day, there's going to be people that think you made the wrong choice, and you know that. I mean, you guys have all been around long enough to understand that.
It's a difficult process all around, because in addition to what you guys have, with what roof to replace or who got left out, we have libraries coming to us, the parks, we got,
Yeah, that's right.
all
That's
different
exactly right.
departments. So we're juggling that, and, if we are receiving emails about a school that feels been overlooked, that you guys are dealing with that, and, we are. So, it's tough decisions all
Okay.
around.
And I just want to, I'm sorry, I just want to remind everybody that we just moved that money and we just designated every bit of it for those two schools. So, unless we end up with some extra money coming in, you're going to give us a plan, but let's just be honest, there are a lot of things that we're doing. I mean,
Right, we're just having general
We're talking about
discussion.
EMS stations, we've talked about those, we've talked about, other facility projects for us, what Kannapolis City Schools and, all of those things it's the same amount of money, and we just moved every bit of it that we had identified from the work session to go for those two schools. So your list is very important. It's going to have to fit into a budget process. You get money every year that's used towards maintenance, that you should be spending, which I presume you are, on the projects that you're identifying. But there's, and the budget's going to have to work itself out for us to have money to do roofs and those expensive things, because that's what that money was sitting there for, and we've already moved it. So decisions will be made as we progress through the budget process. I just want to say that. I understand you have a lot of needs, but, short of a new funding stream and whatever, that's where we are, because that's what we decided to act on the request that we already had before us.
Right.
So that will be a big factor in how we look at our budget and how much we'll be able to put into maintenance for this upcoming school year. That we pretty much fund, and you decide which projects and, that you guys are going to approve based on a lump sum amount that you get on an annual basis. So
Right.
I just wanted to say that, because that's where we are. That's the money that we have available. So, do you want to go on to staffing facilities?
I think Mr. Shee wanted to make a
I
comment.
did want to say just something, and I had talked with Mr. Whitkey about this several weeks ago, and the scenario that he gave me was you know, all of us that are homeowners, when things break in our home or needs to be replaced at some point, most homeowners wait until something breaks before you decide to fix it. Water heater goes out, or, you know, your heat pump, whatever that is, and you just fix it. Well, the problem with schools is in trying to get in a proactive mode of repairing things when the useful life expectancy has expired, rather than waiting until the, whatever it is, goes out, to get these items on a list where we know that at some point the useful life is exhausted and we're on borrowed time. And if those particular items should go out, then guess what that causes? Heat, for example, and possibly in the summertime, the cooling, or other major components of a school that go out. Well, obviously, you have to send the children home. And you can imagine sending 1,000, 1,200 children home because the school can't operate. And so I just want you to keep that in mind, too. And Mr. Wickey's staff has done an excellent job putting Band-Aids on things for years and years and years. And, you know, we could elaborate on that for a long time, but that's really all that I wanted to say, is you just have to keep in mind that a school building is a tremendous amount different than it is for a home. And when you can't wait till things break in the school system, and that's basically what we've had to do. Thank God we hadn't had major things that caused us to close school. But if we don't deal with these maintenance items now, that's what we're facing in the future. And I think Mr. Wickey would agree with me on that, because we have exceeded the useful life of certain items in certain schools way beyond their expected life. And so it could go at any time. And if it does happen, then we have to send the kids home. And then we start getting all kind of emails and all kind of phone calls, just like we did for the inclement weather this week. So I just wanted you to keep that in the back of your mind, too, as you consider these items.
Thank you, Mr. Shute. Yeah, go right ahead.
Along those same lines, I think when I first came into this position, I used to wonder why my predecessors didn't accomplish more, why they didn't replace an entire roof on a building, but they took a section of it and replaced it at a time. And it took me all of about 3 or 4 months until I realized that what they were doing was trying to spend their very limited annual budget monies in a way that would give them the most bang for their buck in terms of addressing the myriad of problems that they faced. That book that we created in that first year that we dropped on your desk, there was a purpose in that. We weren't asking for the money. We were asking for some recognition of the problem. The problem is immense. I point out, I think, having built the schools most recently here, in 15 years, every one of those rooftop units is going to go, has to be replaced, every one of them. That's their lifespan. You might get 1 or 2 or even 10 to run a little bit longer, but then the maintenance costs will eat you up. So you need to plan that in 15 years, at least 2 of those schools, and possibly all 4, will require major investments in terms of the mechanical systems that are in those buildings. And that's just one thing. And those cannot be, the figures, the amount of money you're talking about is not something that we can absorb in an annual budget. You'd use every dollar we had just for those that one item, and probably more. So just to keep it in perspective, the annual budget, we just take care of all the basic operational problems. We have literally, typically around 16,000 work orders coming in every year. It's an immense number of things to do just to keep everything functional. That's where a huge majority of the money goes. So I just wanted to put that perspective on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And just as I guess a point, since you guys, I don't know how long you've been paying attention to our side or not, but when Mr. Wickey got here, he was the head of construction. That was his department, because we had just been through a period where we built, how many schools did we build?
4 at one time.
4 at one time, but over a period of time, it was a lot. And you know it because you're paying the debt on it. But when he got here, that's when the 5 years started of commissioners saying, well, we're done building schools. And so what we did was take his department and meld it with the maintenance facilities. So he's now actually running 2 departments with no extra staff. So that part, and that's going to dovetail into the staffing piece of it. But just as a background, in case you didn't know, he actually sort of took that over, and we have worked very hard to get into a digital age. Is that the right term? On trying to get a little more efficient in how we handle work orders and communication among staff, so we can be just as efficient as we possibly can. So I don't mean to ignore you guys. I keep looking there because there's 4 of them over there. So I'm ignoring the chair too. So don't worry about it if I'm not looking you. Do you guys have any comments you'd like to make about that? Okay. Well, we'll zip through. The next thing we wanted to talk about, and we just touched on it briefly, was just staffing. And we know we've known for quite some time we have a staffing problem. We have identified recently another way to get somebody on board with an alternative way to fund that person. So we've tried to identify something that we knew was a problem and find a solution and try to grab it to kind of help through getting through some of the capital projects that we had budgeted for last year that you funded, so that we can just keep plowing through. And boy, I hope the day, whatever the day is that we're done with that, and we can turn around and tell you we're done and we got to keep going. But just as a practical matter of where we are funding-wise and staffing-wise, I wanted to ask Mr. Shoemaker if he has a little information he wanted to share.
I've done a lot of research on industry standards and trying to figure out where we are as a school system in terms of an industry. And in the industry, they use, for a maintenance technician, they use 80,000 square feet per person, per maintenance technician. Currently, our level is at 143,000 per maintenance tech. So it's pretty major. And when you look at the overall admin, you just heard Mr. Kiger talk about we combined two functions under Mr. Whitkey. Under those 2 functions, you exist the regular maintenance function and all the project function, including the building of schools. Well, his department, the admin portion of his department's been flat since 2004, so the taxpayers have been getting an extraordinary value, because as we've grown our schools, we've grown 50% in square footage since 2004. And I don't have any numbers to go back much further than that, at least that I can do any other comparisons. I can probably get you the square footage of how it increased beyond that. But since 2004 to now, in 10 years, we've increased our school square footage by 50%. That staff has been flat. We've increased our maintenance technicians by 44% during the same time. However, the starting point was wrong to begin with. Back in 2004, we had enough techs to maintain 138,000 square feet per maintenance tech. We are now in 2013-14. I said 140. It's 137.4 thousand. So we're at the exact same level now that we were back in 2004. So we've stayed flat on our maintenance when you look at it as compared to square footage. But when you look at the costs, we haven't kept up with CPI or anything on the costs that we've allowed for maintenance. The point being is we're built to fail right now, and we're going to continue to fail. And so that's why we've got to pull together. We need to find some benchmarking, not only from surrounding areas, but from within here. What are you doing on maintenance? And what does your benchmarking look like? Or do you have benchmarking? I think we've got to drive our county governments to a new level of understanding so we can compare apples to apples of how we're performing, so we can drive ourselves to much better performance in every way. But it's going to come at a price, and that's the other piece, is there is going to be a price that you've got to pay to keep your facilities from deteriorating. And that's the big point. Every day that we don't fix something is where the inflation index carries us a little bit further into debt, and I call it a maintenance debt. Deferred maintenance is nothing more than a maintenance debt, and it's waiting for you sometime down the line. The longer we go with it, the staffing issues are only a symptom of the bigger problem. So as we go forward, we're not going to solve it in this next budget cycle, but we've got to start figuring out how we're going to get there. And I'm challenging each and every one of you, how do we share? How do we work together? How do we compare what we're doing? And we work together to try to resolve these issues because they're massive. And we're doing the taxpayers a disfavor by not letting them know how bad it is. Okay? So that's, the staffing piece is really where we are. Right now, we've used capital dollars. Pam and Mike have allowed us to use some capital dollars to fund 2 temporary positions to help us create scopes of work, bid documents, and chase some projects. So Lynn and Dave can continue to do what they're doing in working with the maintenance folks and also doing new schools and the survey that we've got going. Right now, Dave and Lynn generally write most of the scopes of work and all the bid documents and the contracts, and they review all this and then bring it to us. So they've got a lot on their shoulders when you look at $1 billion worth of assets.
Barry, do you have, and I don't want to shed negative light on something, but I think just for relevance sake, it's worth noting, the number you talked about, our maintenance tech per square foot of what they cover, do you have the Kannapolis number?
Well, I don't have that number because I can't break it out. Kannapolis, we service Kannapolis as a part of our maintenance program. We also service Kannapolis as a part of our transportation program. So they're like a client to us. So we take good care of them, but the cost systems are not set up that we can say, the maintenance tech worked over here in Kannapolis, let's charge him for 7.5 hours to work on this Kannapolis project so that we can, the money just comes into a big bundle and the techs go wherever they're called, and I'm sure they're putting in a tremendous amount of time in their trucks responding to emergency orders, but we don't have a way to functionally divide Kannapolis out from Cabarrus County Schools. The financial systems don't allow us to track by projects. So okay. I couldn't give you quite that data.
That's okay. It is, sometimes it gets lost that we do cover both. So it's tough.
Blake, could I just ask you one question on this? We're getting ready to start building a lot of new schools. I mean, we voted on 2 tonight. You've got more needs than that. I would just request that you keep these maintenance ideas in terms of cost per square foot, in terms of an ongoing maintenance obligation, in the back of your mind. Because I do think that that's an ability right now. We can't change anything in the past, but I do think that from right now forward we can say, hey, if we can cut back on the square footage of some of our buildings, that will save us some money in the long run too. So just keep that in mind as you do that, please.
And we will certainly take that under advisement as well as, and I'll take that, I'll use your comment as a segue into design standards. And we, at 10 after 8, this is going to be a 2-minute little conversation. I mentioned this before, we've got design standards that we worked on. Now that document's from 2010, so it needs a little touch paint, but that's what we're going to use. Commissioner Morse mentioned wanting to have the conversation about design, what materials are we going to use. I think Commissioner Burge mentioned the same thing. And that's a conversation that we do want to have. And I think it might be best at this point to push that off on another day. But as we go forward to work on the design of the new elementary school and the design of a Mount Pleasant Middle School, I think we need to come to some sort of agreement on, just in very general terms, of whether are we designing this for, are these 2 60-year schools? And I mean, and on our side, I think the answer to that is yes. And at what level of energy efficiency are we trying to do? And again, I certainly don't want to go back to any of the discussion we've already had, but some of that drives the number. And so when I guess we know when we come back, it's easy to second guess once you got to make decisions and you got to give the architect direction as you go, and then you've got a number because you've got contractors that have bid on it. Well, it's easy at that point to say, well, you shouldn't be doing this and you shouldn't be doing that. But when we've made decisions along the way for a specific type of material or whatever the case may be, to try to get some of the energy efficiency in the building that we know you're going to be paying for the next 60 years. So I guess the reason it was on here was I really want to have, a pretty high level, detailed discussion with you guys on how that looks and how that works. But our charge is certainly to have a standard that we build to in Cabarrus County and make sure that we're meeting that standard, and we're giving the architect the information and not the other way around, because that's the proper way to do a project. So that was a very quick way to go over design standards.
Well, let me mirror on it. We've done some energy projects, and we're doing them now to try to save energy, and we've saved, what, $1.5 million, or is it?
Well, it was about 900,000 last year. It's been.
Oh, yeah, so it's $1 million, almost $1 million a year. And we've been, You said 900,000 last year, right? But when we look at new schools, we had, don't worry about it.
Okay.
Nobody's gonna hold us accountable for that. We have reduced our energy consumption.
Cost avoidance.
Cost avoidance. Yep. We look at new schools. We don't want our taxpayers paying recurring costs for 60 years. If we could drive those costs down, implement good techniques, we don't have to have a LEED Gold building, but we should sure build the building to a LEED Gold standard and not get the certification, because that costs money, and make these schools energy positive, or at least net zero, where they don't cost any money. Literally, the energy, they can produce enough energy to support themselves. And we've got to start thinking that way, because that project, because it's a 60-year structure, that project pays itself off in 7 or 8 years. Now, most people like the 3-year payback, but because we're going to be living in this building for that long, we can really do things that we couldn't have done in the past, because the technologies are there that weren't there before. And we've gone and, developed technologies that allow us to go into the future. We've got to start thinking that way. But it's going to come at a price tag. We invited an architect to come in here and show us his concept on an energy positive school. We've looked at a school up in Durham that's a net zero school. And in each of these cases, we can design the school to be a net zero. Maybe it's not there yet, but then if we can find the funding or find a private, set up a private partnership where we can get some energy paybacks, then we could get someone in the private sector to fund the panels or whatever it is you want to use to help with the energy, get the tax write-offs, and then after 6 or 7 years, we could get it back. So I think there's a lot of techniques out there, but we've got to start thinking out of the box. What are we going to leave? What are we going to leave our children? And that's the kind of thing, when you pay recurring energy costs, you're not leaving your children anything. If you can get away with doing it and supply the money to get good maintenance costs covered in the building that's producing an asset, producing a commodity, let's say kilowatts, that's an inflation index commodity. And so we've got to start thinking, how can we intelligently do things and set ourselves up for 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, where we're literally reaping the benefits, because we're not going to do them right now. You got to pay for them, but you got to reap the benefits down the road, and those benefits will be dramatic, because we know inflation is here to stay, at least until the world economy collapses. As long as there's a Fed, there will be an inflation. So we've got to deal with it. So that's my soapbox. I'm sorry.
I don't have any more comments. I just want to make sure the guys that are here, that sat here 4 hours, don't leave with something they wish they had said.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think on any of these we were expecting to come to a decision or an agreement from you, but what we hope that this will start a dialogue so that we can find a way to say, okay, look, here's how we need to get together and look through, for instance, design standards for new schools, and come to an agreement on that's what we can live with, so that when we come to you with a proposal, you won't say, oh, whoa, why has it got this in there? Why has it got that in there? It will be, we don't need to waste the architect's time doing something like that. So what we were looking for was just an agreement to start a process to get to agreement.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Well, any other comment? I've got to ask my board for a motion in a second to go in closed session, but before we do that, are any closing comments that you guys want to make to us, or questions about anything we just breeze through?
I would just like to say thank you for coming and for sharing this information with us. It's helpful to understand this at the part of the process that we're at. Mr. Shue, you had said that you wanted some buy-in from us. I hope that you feel like after tonight that you have buy-in from us. We I think showed a pretty big commitment to our public education system tonight, and we believe in you. And I certainly want to make our schools better for all of our children. So thank you very much for coming. I've gained a lot from this, and I appreciate you coming and spending time with us. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Okay, you're going to go down to conference room A, I presume, for your closed session. Is that correct?
is it A? We
Yeah,
just
it's the
said,
one-
we heard conference room, so.
Yeah, it's the one
A?
right next
Okay.
to where you come into the county manager's office.
Okay, fantastic.
So,
Well,
Commissioners, at this time, may I have a motion for the Board of Commissioners to adjourn? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. Thank you.
Board of Education members, I need a motion that the Cabarrus County Board of Education convene in closed session pursuant to General Statute 143-318.11A3 to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, which privilege is hereby acknowledged. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? The Cabarrus County Board of Education is now in closed session.